My name is Eleanor Jensen, and at 68 years old, I never imagined my only son Bradley would drag me to court over money. We were once close, sharing Sunday dinners and holiday traditions. Then came his engagement and the shocking demand that I fund a $300,000 wedding. When I gently explained I couldn't afford such extravagance, everything changed. The lawsuit that followed revealed secrets that shattered our family forever. Can the bonds of blood withstand the power of greed? Before I share my story, tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories of family betrayals that changed lives forever. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the daughter of a factory worker and a school secretary. From an early age, I understood the value of a dollar. My parents taught me that anything worth having was worth working for, a lesson I carried throughout my life. I put myself through community college working nights at a local diner, eventually earning a business degree that changed the trajectory of my life. I met Richard Jensen during my final year of college. He was studying accounting, serious and responsible with a quiet charm that drew me in. We married in 1979 in a simple ceremony that cost less than $2,000, followed by a reception in my parents' backyard. We were young, in love, and determined to build a good life together. Bradley came along 3 years later, our only child after several heartbreaking miscarriages. From the moment I held him, I felt a love so powerful it took my breath away. Richard and I poured everything into raising him, making sure he had opportunities while teaching him the importance of hard work and financial responsibility. I started my business when Bradley was 5 years old, a small stationery shop that grew into a successful printing company over the decades. I worked long hours, often bringing Bradley with me to the shop after school. He would do his homework at a small desk I set up in my office, and later help with simple tasks. Richard remained steadily employed as an accountant at a local firm, handling our family finances with careful precision. We lived comfortably but modestly. Our home was pleasant but not extravagant, a 4-bedroom colonial in a good school district. We drove sensible cars, took one family vacation each year, and saved consistently for retirement and Bradley's college education. We taught Bradley to save his allowance for things he wanted, to compare prices, and to understand the difference between needs and wants. As Bradley grew into his teenage years, I noticed subtle changes in his attitude toward money. His friends were primarily from wealthier families, with bigger homes and luxury cars. He began making comments about our house being small, our cars being outdated. When his 16th birthday approached, he expected a brand new car rather than the reliable used sedan we had budgeted for. His disappointment was palpable, and I felt the first real distance growing between us. College widened that gap. Bradley attended State University on a combination of the savings we had accumulated, a partial scholarship, and student loans we helped him secure. He joined a fraternity known for its wealthy members and expensive social events. Richard and I noticed his changing tastes and attitudes during holiday visits home. Designer clothes replaced his previous wardrobe. His conversations revolved around his friends' vacation homes and luxury spring break trips. Upon graduation, Bradley took a job at a marketing firm. His salary was respectable for an entry-level position, but his lifestyle suggested a much higher income. He leased a luxury apartment in the trendiest part of the city, and drove a car that cost more than Richard and I spent on vehicles in a decade. When I expressed concern about his spending, he brushed me off, saying he was networking and needed to look the part to succeed. It was during this period that he met Tiffany Miller. She came from a family with old money, evident in her polished appearance and sophisticated mannerisms. The first time Bradley brought her to dinner at our home, I noticed her subtly scanning our furnishings, a flicker of judgment crossing her face. She was unfailingly polite, but somehow made me feel that my carefully maintained home was inadequate. Bradley seemed transformed in her presence, dropping names of expensive restaurants and exclusive clubs I had never heard him mention before. He spoke of future plans that seemed disconnected from the values Richard and I had worked so hard to instill. A penthouse apartment, exotic vacations, country club memberships. I worried about the influence Tiffany had on our son, but kept my concerns to myself, not wanting to push him further away. Tiffany understands success, Bradley told me one afternoon when we were alone in the kitchen. Her family knows how to live well. They have connections I need. I remember washing dishes as he spoke, my hands submerged in soapy water, wondering when material possessions and social status had become more important to my son than character and hard work. I dried my hands and turned to face him. Being successful means different things to different people, Bradley, I said carefully. Your father and I built a good life through hard work and careful planning. We have no debt, a secure retirement, and a business I built from nothing. That's success too. Bradley smiled indulgently, as if I couldn't possibly understand the world he now inhabited. Times have changed, Mom. You have to spend money to make money. Tiffany gets that. I nodded, not wanting to argue, but a heaviness settled in my chest. The son I raised seemed to be disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone who measured worth in dollar signs rather than character. Richard noticed the changes too, but was more willing to dismiss them as just a phase or young people finding their way. He remained Bradley's champion, always ready with encouragement or financial advice when asked. Their bond had always been strong, built on weekend fishing trips and Richard patiently teaching Bradley about sports, cars, and mathematics. I was grateful they remained close even as I felt my own relationship with our son shifting. As Bradley and Tiffany's relationship grew serious, his visits home became less frequent. When they did occur, Tiffany invariably had scheduling conflicts that prevented her from joining him. I tried reaching out, suggesting lunch dates or shopping trips to bond with my potential future daughter-in-law, but she was always politely busy. I told myself to be patient, that relationships take time to build, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Tiffany had already decided I wasn't worth knowing. The engagement announcement came via text message on a Tuesday evening in April. No phone call, just a photo of Tiffany's hand adorned with a diamond ring that looked larger than anything I had ever worn. The caption read simply, "She said yes. Wedding planning begins." Despite my misgivings about how our relationship had evolved, genuine happiness for Bradley washed over me. My son was getting married. I called him immediately, my voice thick with emotion as I expressed my congratulations and asked about their plans. Bradley sounded excited but distracted, promising we would all get together soon to discuss details. That dinner took place at La Maison, the most expensive restaurant in the city. Richard and I arrived to find Bradley, Tiffany, and her parents already seated at a corner table. James and Margaret Miller exuded wealth from their perfectly tailored clothing to their subtle, but expensive jewelry. James ordered champagne without looking at the price, waving away Richard's offer to split the bill. "We're celebrating," he said with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Our little girl is getting married." Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around Tiffany and Bradley's life together. Their recent vacation to the Maldives, their plans to purchase a condo in the exclusive Riverside development, the connections James was leveraging to advance Bradley's career. I tried to contribute, asking about wedding ideas and offering to help with planning, but my comments seemed to disappear into the air, acknowledged with polite nods before the conversation shifted back to topics that highlighted the Millers' affluence. The second dinner, ostensibly to discuss wedding plans, took place 2 weeks later at an upscale steakhouse. This time, Bradley took control of the conversation almost immediately after our appetizers arrived. "We've been looking at venues," he announced, sliding a glossy brochure across the table. "The Langham estate is perfect. It's where Tiffany always imagined getting married." I glanced at the brochure featuring a sprawling mansion with manicured gardens and ornate ballrooms. It looked like something from a movie, not a real wedding venue. "It looks lovely," I said carefully. "What sort of budget are you working with for the wedding?" Bradley and Tiffany exchanged glances. "Well, that's what we wanted to discuss," Bradley said. "The Langham is exclusive, and with everything we want, the wedding will cost around $300,000. I nearly choked on my water. Richard's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "300,000? I repeated, certain I had misheard. "It includes everything," Tiffany explained, her voice smooth as silk. "The venue for the entire weekend, catering for 250 guests, top-shelf open bar, designer flowers, the 10-piece orchestra, my custom gown from Paris." She continued listing extravagances while I tried to process the astronomical figure. Our house had cost less when we purchased it 25 years ago. "That's quite a wedding," Richard said when Tiffany finally paused. Have you considered something more moderate? You could still have a beautiful celebration for a fraction of that cost. Bradley frowned. This isn't just any wedding. This is our wedding. It needs to be perfect. Of course you want it to be special, I agreed. But $300,000 is more than most people's homes cost. It's not a realistic amount for a one-day celebration. Actually, Bradley said, straightening in his chair, tradition dictates that the bride's family handles the wedding costs. But James and Margaret have explained that their investments are currently tied up, so they won't be able to contribute financially. James Miller nodded solemnly. Unfortunate timing with the market as it is. Our portfolio is quite extensive but not liquid at the moment. So, Bradley continued, looking directly at me, as the mother of the groom, the responsibility falls to you. We know about the business, Mom. You can afford this. The presumption left me speechless. Richard cleared his throat beside me. Bradley, your mother works incredibly hard for every dollar her business earns. That money is allocated to running the company, paying employees, and our retirement. We don't have $300,000 sitting around for a wedding. You could take out a business loan, Tiffany suggested, as if it were the most reasonable solution in the world. Or liquidate some investments. That's not how business loans work, I said, finding my voice. And our investments are our retirement security. We're not jeopardizing our future for an unnecessarily extravagant wedding. Bradley's face hardened. So you're refusing to help us? No, I said carefully. We're refusing to bankrupt ourselves. We would be happy to contribute $20,000 toward your wedding. That's a generous amount that we can manage without compromising our financial security. Tiffany made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. 20,000? That barely covers flowers. Then perhaps you should consider different flowers, Richard suggested, an edge creeping into his voice. I can't believe you're being so selfish, Bradley said, his voice rising. This is the most important day of my life. The most important day should be about your commitment to each other, I said, not how much money you spend impressing guests. My parents had a beautiful wedding, Tiffany interjected. Everyone still talks about it. I deserve the same. And my parents eloped to the courthouse, I countered. They were happily married for 45 years until they passed away. The wedding doesn't make the marriage. This is about status, Bradley said flatly. About connections and impressions. You've never understood that. You're right, I agreed. I don't understand valuing status over financial security. And I don't understand how my son became someone who would. Bradley threw his napkin on the table and stood. Come on, Tiffany. They clearly don't support our happiness. Bradley, please, Richard began, but our son was already guiding Tiffany toward the exit, leaving us sitting in stunned silence with the uneaten meals and the bill. 3 weeks passed without a word from Bradley. I called and texted several times, receiving no response. My messages started with attempts to reconcile, explaining our financial situation in detail, offering to help find beautiful but affordable alternatives. As days stretched into weeks, my texts became increasingly worried, asking simply if he was okay. The silence was deafening until a curt text finally arrived. Unless you're reconsidering your position on the wedding, we have nothing to discuss. I stared at those cold words on my screen, struggling to recognize my son in them. I wrote back immediately. We love you and want to be part of your wedding. Please let's talk in person. His response came hours later. Actions speak louder than words. Your actions show you don't care about my happiness. The text grew increasingly hostile over the following weeks. Bradley accused me of favoring my business over him, of hoarding wealth while denying him his dream wedding. Each message felt like a knife to my heart. The son I had lovingly raised now viewing me as nothing more than a financial resource who was failing him. Your mother is beside herself, Richard told Bradley during one of his attempts to call our son. I could hear only Richard's side of the conversation as he paced our living room. This isn't like you, son. We raised you to understand financial responsibility. No, that's not fair. We are supporting you, just not financially bankrupting ourselves. Bradley, please. Richard hung up, his face drawn with worry. He says Tiffany's parents are disappointed in us. They apparently told her that mothers traditionally step up for weddings when needed. Traditionally, weddings didn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, I replied, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. The pressure increased when I began receiving messages from Tiffany's mother, Margaret. Her texts were masterpieces of passive aggression, veiled in concern but dripping with judgment. Tiffany is absolutely heartbroken, one message read. Every girl dreams of her perfect day. I told her perhaps you didn't understand the importance of these traditions. In our circle, mothers spare no expense for their children's happiness. I didn't respond, unsure how to politely tell this woman that her circle sounded materialistic and disconnected from financial reality. The conflict spilled onto social media when Bradley began posting thinly veiled comments about parents who claimed to love their children, but showed their true colors when it mattered. Each post received sympathetic responses from Tiffany's friends and family, creating a narrative of me as a villainous mother denying my son his happiness. My sister June called one evening, her voice concerned. "Eleanor, is everything okay? I just got off the phone with Bradley. He told me you're refusing to help with the wedding because you've never approved of Tiffany." "What?" I gasped. "That's absolutely not true. This is about an unreasonable financial demand, not about Tiffany. He said you're sitting on money from the business but just don't want to share it. That you've always been controlling with money." The mischaracterization stung deeply. I had worked tirelessly to build my business, reinvesting profits, carefully managing costs, and treating my employees fairly. The success I had achieved came through decades of discipline and sacrifice, not greed or control. My concern grew when I learned through a mutual business acquaintance that the Millers were actually quite wealthy, with multiple properties and extensive investments. Their claim of being unable to contribute to the wedding was clearly false, raising questions about why they would lie and why Bradley would accept their deception while pressuring me. Things escalated further when I discovered Bradley had taken out substantial loans for wedding deposits, putting himself into significant debt. He had apparently told the venue and vendors that payment was coming from me, creating financial obligations he couldn't fulfill. I arranged to meet Bradley at a coffee shop, hoping face-to-face conversation might break through the wall between us. He arrived late, already defensive, barely making eye contact as he slid into the seat across from me. "I appreciate you meeting me," I began carefully. "I've missed you. I'm only here because you said it was important," he replied, checking his watch. I took a deep breath. "Bradley, I've learned you've taken out loans for wedding deposits. I'm concerned about the financial stress you're putting on yourself." His eyes narrowed. "I wouldn't need loans if you would do your part. My part as your mother is to love you and support you in ways that are actually helpful, not harmful. Spending $300,000 on a wedding is harmful to everyone involved." "It's harmful to your image, you mean," he snapped. "You're embarrassed because you can't keep up with Tiffany's family." "This has nothing to do with keeping up appearances," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's about financial responsibility and reasonable expectations." "You have the money," he insisted. "You just don't want to spend it on me." "Bradley, our house costs less than what you're asking for. My business is successful but not limitless. Our retirement savings are carefully calculated for our needs as we age. We're offering what we can genuinely afford." "It's not enough," he nearly shouted, causing heads to turn at nearby tables. "Either you pay for the wedding we want, or don't bother coming at all." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "I will always be your mother," I said quietly. "My door is always open to you. But I won't bankrupt myself for one day of extravagance." Bradley stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss." I watched my only child walk away, my heart breaking with each step he took. That night I barely slept, replaying our conversation and wondering where I had gone wrong in raising him. Richard tried to comfort me, but I could see he was equally disturbed by Bradley's behavior. The final shot came 3 weeks later when a certified letter arrived. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing legal documents inside. Bradley was suing me for the wedding costs, claiming I had verbally promised to pay for his wedding years ago, and that my last-minute refusal constituted a breach of promise that was causing him financial and emotional harm. I sat at our kitchen table, the papers spread before me, feeling as though I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. The son I had rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bicycle, and cheered at graduations was now taking me to court over money. The disconnection between that loving boy and this stranger was incomprehensible. "He's suing me," I whispered when Richard came home, my voice hollow with disbelief. "Our son is suing us." The lawsuit felt like the ultimate betrayal, transforming a family disagreement into legal warfare. Bradley was claiming I had explicitly promised to pay for his wedding when he was in college, a conversation I had no recollection of ever having. Even if we had casually discussed wedding costs years ago, no reasonable person would interpret that as a binding promise to fund any wedding regardless of cost. "This is completely frivolous," Sandra Mitchell assured me during our first meeting. I had selected her as my attorney based on her reputation for handling family disputes with both legal acumen and emotional intelligence. "Unfortunately, frivolous doesn't mean it will go away without a proper response," she continued, reviewing the documents. "We need to gather evidence demonstrating that no such promise was made, or if casual conversation did occur, that it couldn't reasonably be interpreted as a blank check for unlimited wedding expenses." The preparation process forced me to dig through years of financial records, emails, text messages, and family photographs. I needed to demonstrate our consistent financial values and practices, showing that funding an exorbitant wedding would be completely out of character and beyond our means. As I sorted through business documents, I discovered the first irregularity. A loan had been taken out against my business property 6 months earlier, with what appeared to be my signature on the paperwork. I had no recollection of this loan, nor any record of the funds in my business accounts. "Richard," I called, my voice shaking as I held the document, "do you know anything about this business loan for $50,000? He examined the paper, his brow furrowed. "I've never seen this before. Are you sure it's legitimate? The signature looks like mine, but I never signed this," I said. "And I certainly never received $50,000. Further investigation revealed more discrepancies. There were unauthorized transfers from my business account to an unknown account over the past year, totaling nearly $70,000. The transfers were small enough individually to have escaped immediate notice but substantial in their cumulative effect. With growing dread, I requested all signatories on my accounts from the bank. The response confirmed my worst fears. Bradley had been added as an authorized signer on several accounts approximately 18 months ago. The signature authorizing this addition looked like mine but was clearly forged. "Someone has been stealing from my business," I told Sandra during our next meeting, pushing the documents across her desk. "And all evidence points to Bradley." Sandra reviewed the papers carefully. "This changes everything. We need to file a police report and amend our response to the lawsuit with a counterclaim." "A police report?" My stomach twisted at the thought. "Against my own son?" "Eleanor," Sandra said gently, "what Bradley has done is criminal fraud. The lawsuit he filed against you may be an attempt to legitimize money he's already taken, or to get more before the theft is discovered." The investigation deepened, revealing a pattern of financial abuse I had been completely blind to. Bradley had not only forged my signature on loans and transfers, but had also gained access to one of our retirement accounts 6 months earlier, withdrawing $30,000. The withdrawal notification had been sent to an email address mimicking mine, with just one character different, an account Bradley had created to intercept financial communications. The evidence was overwhelming and devastating. My son had been systematically stealing from me for over a year, to the tune of nearly $150,000. The betrayal was almost incomprehensible. How could the child I raised, who had watched me build my business through honest hard work, steal from his own mother? I sat alone in my home office late one night, surrounded by the evidence of my son's crimes, and wept. For the little boy I had loved so fiercely. For the man he had become. For the relationship now irreparably damaged. When the tears finally subsided, a terrible realization began to form. Bradley could not have gained this level of access to my accounts without help from someone who knew my financial details intimately. Someone like his father. The thought seemed unthinkable at first, but as I reviewed the timeline and documents, patterns emerged that I couldn't ignore. The forged signatures looked remarkably accurate, as if created by someone who had seen my signature thousands of times. The accounts accessed were ones Richard helped manage. The timing of certain transfers coincided with periods when I was traveling for business and Richard was home alone. I waited until the following evening to confront him, gathering my courage and evidence throughout the day. When Richard returned from work, I had the documents spread across the dining room table. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "And I need you to tell me the truth." Richard set down his briefcase, his eyes moving from my face to the papers on the table. Something in his expression shifted subtly, a flicker of recognition followed by carefully constructed confusion. "What's all this?" he asked, moving toward the table. "Evidence that Bradley has been stealing from us," I said. "But there are things I can't explain. Things Bradley couldn't have done without help from someone who knows our finances intimately." Richard's face paled slightly. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking directly. Did you help Bradley access our accounts?" "Eleanor, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I said. "That's what I'm trying to understand." Richard began a forceful denial, but as I presented specific evidence, his protests weakened. I pointed to access times that coincided with my business trips, to financial details Bradley couldn't have known without inside help, to the uncanny accuracy of the forged signatures. "He's our son," Richard finally said, his voice breaking. "He needed help." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. My husband of nearly 45 years had conspired with our son to steal from me. "Help?" I repeated incredulously. "You call theft help?" "He was in trouble," Richard said. "Credit card debt, loans coming due. He was desperate. So you decided to steal from me instead of telling me the truth? Instead of helping him learn financial responsibility?" "I didn't think of it as stealing," Richard insisted. "Just borrowing. He promised he would pay it all back before you ever noticed." The justification was so absurd I almost laughed. "And now he's suing me for more money. Was that part of your plan too?" Richard couldn't meet my eyes. "He said he just wanted to scare you into helping with the wedding. He never intended to go through with the lawsuit." But the lawsuit was very real, as was the theft, and now I had decisions to make. After a sleepless night, I instructed Sandra to proceed with the counterclaim, including all evidence of Bradley's theft and Richard's complicity. "Are you sure?" Sandra asked. "This will permanently affect your family relationships." I thought of the son who no longer resembled the child I raised and the husband who had betrayed decades of trust. "Those relationships are already destroyed," I said quietly. "Now I need to protect myself." The days leading up to the court date were a special kind of hell. Richard alternatively begged forgiveness and minimized his actions, unable to understand the depth of his betrayal. Bradley continued his silence, communicating only through his attorney. I moved into our guest bedroom, unable to share a bed with the man who had conspired against me. One evening I overheard Richard on the phone in his study, the door not quite closed. "It's all falling apart," he was saying in a hushed tone. "She knows everything. No, I didn't tell her about that. She's going through with the counterclaim. I don't know what she found. Yes, she moved out of our bedroom. I know we should have told her the truth. I didn't confront him about the call, but it confirmed what I already knew. There were likely more secrets I hadn't yet uncovered, more betrayals waiting to be revealed." The courtroom felt sterile and imposing as I took my seat beside Sandra. Richard sat in the back, having arrived separately. Bradley and Tiffany entered with their attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Bradley didn't look in my direction, his jaw set in stubborn determination. Tiffany glanced at me once, her expression a mixture of disdain and triumph, as if she had already won. Bradley's attorney presented their case first, painting a picture of a mother who had promised to support her son's wedding, only to cruelly withdraw that support at the last minute. He described the deposits already made, the contracts signed, the emotional distress caused by my sudden and inexplicable refusal to fulfill my clearly stated promise. Throughout his presentation, I maintained my composure, though each mischaracterization stung. Bradley occasionally nodded along with his attorney's statements, his expression self-righteous and entitled. I barely recognized him. When it was Sandra's turn, she began calmly but forcefully. Your Honor, not only is there no evidence of any promise by Mrs. Jensen to fund an extravagant wedding, but we have discovered during preparation for this case that the plaintiff, Bradley Jensen, has been systematically defrauding his mother for over a year. Bradley's confident expression faltered slightly as Sandra methodically presented the evidence of his theft. The unauthorized account access, the forged signatures, the diverted funds, the fraudulent loans. With each new piece of evidence, his face grew paler. Furthermore, Sandra continued, we have evidence that Richard Jensen, the defendant's father and the plaintiff's father, was complicit in this fraud. At this, a murmur ran through the courtroom. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Bradley's attorney leaned over to whisper urgently in his ear. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, peered over her glasses at Bradley. Mr. Jensen, these are very serious allegations. Do you wish to respond? Bradley conferred with his attorney, who looked increasingly concerned. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to review these claims. I'm interested in hearing Mr. Jensen's explanation now, the judge replied firmly. These documents appear to show clear evidence of fraud and theft. As Sandra presented additional evidence, including bank records showing the diverted funds had been used for luxury purchases, expensive trips, and the down payment on Bradley and Tiffany's condo, Richard's face contorted with horror. Whether from the public revelation of his complicity or the realization of how extensively Bradley had been stealing, I couldn't tell. The pivotal moment came when Sandra introduced evidence we had discovered just days before the hearing. Bank records showing Richard had independently transferred $30,000 from our joint savings account to Bradley's personal account 3 weeks after our dinner confrontation about the wedding costs. Your Honor, Sandra explained, it appears that Mr. Richard Jensen has been enabling his son's financial irresponsibility for years, culminating in these fraudulent activities against his wife's business and personal accounts. The judge turned her attention to Richard, who seemed to physically shrink under her gaze. Mr. Jensen, would you like to address these allegations? Richard slowly made his way to the front of the courtroom. He looked decades older than his 69 years as he faced the judge. Is it true that you assisted your son in accessing your wife's accounts without her knowledge or consent? The judge asked directly. Richard's shoulders slumped. Yes, Your Honor. And did you know what these funds were being used for? Bradley said he needed help with debts, Richard said weakly. He promised it would be temporary, that he would pay it back. Did you authorize or assist with the withdrawal from the retirement account? Richard hesitated, glancing at Bradley, who was staring at the table in front of him. Yes, Your Honor. Bradley said he was in trouble with some creditors. I gave him the account information and helped him set up the email to receive notifications. And the recent transfer from the joint savings account? Bradley said he needed it for wedding expenses, Richard admitted. He said Eleanor was being unreasonable, that all mothers help with weddings. Did it occur to you that taking money from your wife without her knowledge or consent is theft, Mr. Jensen? The judge asked pointedly. Richard's face crumpled. I didn't think of it that way. I just wanted to help my son. By stealing from your wife, the judge clarified. You do understand that's what you did? Ah, yes. I see that now. The judge turned her attention to Bradley. Mr. Jensen, did you forge your mother's signature on loan documents? Bradley conferred with his attorney, who shook his head slightly. On advice of counsel, I declined to answer that question at this time. Very wise, the judge noted dryly. Given the evidence presented, I am dismissing the plaintiff's lawsuit with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring the evidence of fraud and theft to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. She looked directly at me. Mrs. Jensen, I strongly advise you to secure your financial accounts immediately and consider filing for a restraining order against both your son and husband to protect your assets while this matter is being investigated further. The courtroom seemed to spin around me as the reality of the situation sank in. My family was irreparably broken. My husband of nearly 45 years and my only child had conspired to steal from me, and now faced potential criminal charges. The lawsuit that was meant to force me into funding an extravagant wedding had instead exposed their betrayal for the world to see. As the judge adjourned the hearing, Richard approached me, his face ravaged by shame and desperation. "Eleanor, please," he began. "I can explain everything if you'll just listen." I gathered my belongings and stood, looking at the stranger who had shared my bed and my life for decades. "I think you've explained quite enough today, Richard." Without another word, I walked out of the courtroom alone, leaving behind the two men who had broken my heart. The house felt cavernous and empty when I returned home from court. For decades it had been filled with family sounds. Richard's evening news programs, holiday gatherings, Bradley's childhood laughter. Now the silence was deafening, a physical reminder of what I had lost. I moved methodically through the rooms, securing valuables and important documents. Sandra had advised me to change the locks immediately, which a locksmith was scheduled to do the following morning. Until then, I placed a chair under the bedroom doorknob, a precaution that felt surreal in my own home of 30 years. Richard called repeatedly that evening, his voicemails growing increasingly desperate. I listened to each one, searching for something genuine in his words, some explanation that could possibly justify years of deception. "Eleanor, please call me back. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to help Bradley. You've always been so strict with money, and he needed help. Please, 45 years of marriage has to count for something." His attempts to shift blame onto me only strengthened my resolve. I had not been strict with money. I had been responsible. There was a world of difference between those concepts that Richard had apparently never grasped. The following morning, I met with Sandra to understand the full legal implications of what had happened and what might come next. "The district attorney will review the evidence and decide whether to press criminal charges," she explained. "Given the amount of money involved and the clear documentation, charges are likely." "Against both of them?" I asked, my stomach twisting at the thought of Richard and Bradley in court again, possibly even facing jail time. "Potentially, yes. The evidence shows different levels of involvement, but complicity in fraud is still a crime." I nodded, trying to process the reality of our situation. "What about divorce?" The word felt foreign on my tongue after nearly 45 years of marriage. "Given the circumstances, we can file on grounds of financial misconduct. It will strengthen your position in the division of assets, particularly since Richard participated in stealing from your business." The conversation continued with discussions of restraining orders, securing financial accounts, and notifying my business partners and employees of potential disruptions. Each step was necessary but painful, dismantling the life I had spent decades building. When I returned home, I found Richard waiting on the front porch. The locksmith had already changed the locks, leaving Richard literally locked out of our shared life. Something about seeing him there, suitcase at his feet, broke through the numbness I had been cultivating. "I need to get some things," he said, standing as I approached. "Clothes, my medications, my laptop." I unlocked the door without speaking and stood aside. He followed me into the house that had been our home, now transformed into contested territory. "Eleanor, can we please talk?" he asked as I watched him gather his belongings in the bedroom. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but there are things you don't understand." "What don't I understand, Richard?" I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. "That you betrayed me? That you helped our son steal from me? That you valued his immediate gratification over our 45 years together?" "I was afraid," he admitted, sitting heavily on the edge of the bed. "Afraid of losing Bradley. He was pulling away from us, becoming closer to Tiffany's family. When he came to me with financial problems, helping him felt like a way to stay connected." "By stealing from me?" I shook my head in disbelief. "You could have talked to me. We could have helped him together the right way." "You would have lectured him about responsibility," Richard said. "You would have made him feel worse than he already did. So instead, you taught him that theft and deception are acceptable solutions to financial problems?" The absurdity of his reasoning infuriated me. "You enabled his worst behaviors instead of helping him become a better man." Richard had no answer for that. He continued packing in silence, the weight of decades settling between us. Later that week, I received a text from Bradley. After all the pain he had caused, all I felt was a dull weariness when his name appeared on my screen. "We need to talk. Dad is staying with me. Can we meet?" I agreed to meet him at a public park, unwilling to be alone with him given recent events. He was waiting on a bench when I arrived, looking disheveled and tired, a far cry from the polished appearance he had cultivated since meeting Tiffany. "Mom," he began awkwardly as I sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. "Bradley," I acknowledged. "What did you want to discuss?" "The district attorney is reviewing the case," he said. "My lawyer says I could face significant penalties." I waited, wondering if this meeting was simply an attempt to convince me to drop potential charges. "Tiffany broke off the engagement," he continued after a moment. "Once she realized there wouldn't be an extravagant wedding or access to your money, she left. Her parents are threatening to sue me for the deposits they claim they paid." The irony might have been amusing under different circumstances. "I'm sorry your relationship ended," I said, surprised to find I meant it. No matter what he had done, I never wanted my son to experience pain. "I didn't come here to ask you to drop the charges," Bradley said, seeming to read my thoughts. "I know what I did was wrong. Really wrong. Dad and I both know that." "Then why did you ask to meet?" "Because I needed to see you," he said simply. "To tell you I'm sorry, even though sorry doesn't begin to cover it." I got caught up in Tiffany's world, in trying to be someone I'm not. I lost sight of everything you and Dad taught me growing up. "Your father taught you it was okay to steal from me," I pointed out, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Bradley shook his head. "No, he got caught up in it too, trying to help me when I told him I was in trouble. He never should have done it, and I never should have asked him to. We're both to blame." His acknowledgement of responsibility was unexpected, but it came far too late to undo the damage that had been done. "I've started looking for a regular job," he continued. "Something steady to start paying back what I took. I know it will take years, but I'm going to repay every cent." I studied my son's face, searching for the child I had raised in the man before me. For the first time in years, I saw glimmers of that boy in his humbled expression. "Actions speak louder than words, Bradley," I said, echoing his own text from months earlier. "If you're serious about making amends, it will take more than promises." He nodded. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I understand what I did wrong." As we parted ways, I felt no sense of closure or reconciliation, just a sad acknowledgement that the road ahead would be long and difficult for all of us. The following weeks brought major changes. I filed for divorce after 45 years of marriage, a decision that sent shockwaves through our extended family and social circle. Many couldn't understand how I could end such a long union, unaware of the betrayal that had destroyed its foundation. I threw myself into rebuilding my business, which had suffered during the turmoil. My employees rallied around me once I explained the situation, their loyalty a balm to my wounded spirit. I found unexpected strength in my independence, making decisions without Richard's input for the first time in decades. The first holiday season alone was the hardest. Thanksgiving had always been a family celebration at our home, with my signature turkey and Richard's mother's pumpkin pie recipe. This year I accepted my sister June's invitation instead, grateful for her support but acutely aware of the empty spaces where Richard and Bradley should have been. "You're doing remarkably well," June told me as we washed dishes after dinner. "I don't know if I could be as strong in your position." "I'm not strong," I admitted. "I'm just surviving, taking each day as it comes." "That is strength, Eleanor," she insisted. "After what they did, many would have crumbled. You're rebuilding your life instead." Perhaps she was right. Each small step forward, each decision made, each night survived alone was its own kind of victory. The woman I was becoming in the aftermath of betrayal was different from the woman I had been before, more self-reliant, more cautious, but perhaps ultimately more authentic. 6 months after the court hearing, I settled into my new condominium, a modern 2-bedroom in a secure building downtown. It was half the size of the family home I had shared with Richard, which now stood empty on the market, but its smaller space felt liberating rather than confining. I had carefully selected each piece of furniture and decoration, creating a space that reflected only my tastes and preferences for the first time in my adult life. The business had stabilized after the initial upheaval. With the help of my longtime manager Diane, we had implemented new financial controls and transparency measures. The employees who had stood by me during the crisis had been rewarded with bonuses and increased responsibilities. We were even expanding into digital printing services, an innovation I might never have pursued if not forced to reevaluate every aspect of the business. My new routine included weekly dinners with June, morning walks with a neighbor who had also recently divorced, and volunteering at a financial literacy program for women. These new connections couldn't replace what I had lost, but they added texture and meaning to days that might otherwise have been consumed by grief and anger. Richard's attempts at reconciliation had gradually decreased as the divorce proceedings advanced. His initial daily calls dwindled to occasional texts, usually regarding practical matters of asset division. The last I heard, he had moved to an apartment across town and taken a part-time accounting position to supplement his retirement income, which had been significantly reduced in the divorce settlement. I had not seen Bradley since our meeting in the park months earlier, though his attorney had been in contact with mine regarding repayment arrangements. The district attorney had ultimately offered Bradley a plea deal with probation and restitution requirements rather than jail time, given his lack of prior criminal record and willingness to repay the stolen funds. I was selecting produce at the grocery store when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mom!" I turned to find Bradley standing there, shopping basket in hand, dressed in the uniform of a local hardware store. The contrast with his former designer wardrobe was striking. "Bradley," I acknowledged, unsure what else to say in this unexpected encounter. "You look well," he said awkwardly. "I heard you sold the house." "Yes, about a month ago. I've moved downtown." He nodded. "I'm working at Jensen's Hardware now. No relation, just a coincidence. Assistant manager trainee." "That's good," I said, genuinely pleased he had found legitimate employment. "Honest work." "Very honest," he agreed with a self-deprecating smile. "And not nearly as glamorous as marketing, but I actually like it. Working with my hands, helping people solve practical problems." We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, the weight of all that had happened hanging between us. "I wanted to let you know," Bradley finally continued. "The first repayment will be deposited next week. It's not much, but it's a start." "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "I've been seeing a therapist," he added, "trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I became someone who could hurt the person who always loved me most." His acknowledgement of my love, despite everything, touched something deep within me. "I hope it's helping." "It is. Turns out entitlement and insecurity are a dangerous combination." He shifted his weight nervously. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. But I want you to know I think about you every day, and I'm working to become someone you might be proud of again someday." "I hope you become someone you can be proud of, Bradley," I replied. "That's more important." We parted with an awkward goodbye, not quite ready for the hug that would have once been natural between us. As I watched him walk away, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps someday we might rebuild some version of a relationship, different from before but potentially honest in a way it hadn't been for years. Richard's attempts at explanation continued through sporadic emails and messages. "I never meant to hurt you," became his constant refrain, as if intention negated impact. I eventually stopped responding altogether, finding more peace in silence than in his justifications. With Sandra's help, I restructured my finances completely, ensuring my assets were protected and my business interests secure. I updated my will, removing Richard and adjusting Bradley's inheritance to include strict conditions regarding financial responsibility and ethical behavior. The divorce was finalized exactly 1 year after the court hearing that had exposed the betrayal. I marked the occasion not with sadness but with a small gathering of new friends and old, a celebration of survival and new beginnings rather than an acknowledgement of ending. "To Eleanor," June toasted, raising her glass, "who taught us all that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." The guests clinked glasses, their faces warm with genuine affection. In their eyes I saw not pity for what I had lost but admiration for what I had found, strength I never knew I possessed. As my new life took shape, I received an unexpected letter from Bradley. Unlike his previous attempts at communication, this one showed signs of genuine reflection and growth. "I've been working with my therapist on understanding how I became someone who could justify stealing from his own mother," he wrote. The sense of entitlement I developed, the materialism that consumed me, none of it brought real happiness. I see now that the values you tried to instill in me, the ones I rejected, were meant to protect me from becoming exactly what I became. He went on to describe his new apartment, modest but paid for honestly, his continuing work at the hardware store, where he had received a small promotion, the community college classes he was taking in business ethics and accounting. I don't expect a response, he concluded. I just wanted you to know that the lessons you taught me weren't wasted after all. They were just delayed in taking root. I hope someday to show you, rather than just tell you, that I've changed. I read the letter several times, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda, but found only what seemed to be genuine remorse and effort. After careful consideration, I sent a brief response, opening the door to very limited communication while maintaining clear boundaries. As the second year of my new life began, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. The betrayal had been devastating, shattering the foundations of my existence. Yet from those broken pieces, I had constructed something new and unexpectedly satisfying. At 68, I had discovered independence I never knew I was missing, strength I never knew I possessed, and friendships I never knew I needed. The hardest lesson had been learning that those closest to us can cause the deepest wounds. The most valuable lesson was discovering that such wounds, while leaving scars, need not be fatal. There is life after betrayal. Different certainly, altered permanently, but potentially richer in its authenticity and self-knowledge. I still have moments of anger and grief for what was lost. Days when I miss the security of a 45-year marriage, despite its flawed foundation. Times when I ache to return to the simple joy of being Bradley's mother, before money and materialism corrupted our relationship. But those moments are balanced by new joys. The freedom to make decisions without compromise. The satisfaction of running my business according to my values. The discovery of new interests and friendships. The knowledge that I am stronger than I ever imagined. If you're facing betrayal from those you trusted most, know that while the pain is real and valid, it doesn't define your future. Standing firm in your own truth, regardless of the cost, brings a peace that compliance never could. Rebuilding after betrayal isn't just about survival. It's about creating something authentic from the ashes of what was lost. The journey continues one day at a time. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a major betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most authentic beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find strength in your own journeys, whatever challenges they may bring.